and welcome to the programme. I'm Nima Abuarte. The defence industry gathered here in Abu Dhabi this week to take part in the Middle East's largest military trade show. Last time it took place at the start of the Arab Spring. 2 years on, how has defence spending changed across this region? Also coming up this week, fashion fakes. Is Dubai doing enough to clamp down on counterfeits?
We need to keep vigilance, we need to keep continuous complaints as brand owners to the law enforcement authorities, and we need as law enforcement authorities to continue cleaning these markets up.
Can they cut it? I'm visiting some of Dubai's traditional tailors to see how they're going to take on the modern competition.
And a firm decision: should foreigners be allowed a majority stake in companies here in the Gulf? But first, we're at the biggest defence show in the Middle East. Ministers from across the world are meeting with companies to look at the latest developments in military hardware and defence. In fact, Gulf countries are amongst the biggest spenders on defence in the world. They occupy 3 of the world's top 4 spots. Saudi Arabia spends a tenth of its income on defence. Then comes Oman at 9.7%. The UAE spends 6.9% of its GDP on this sector. Compare that to 4.7%, which is what the US spends, and 2.6%, which is what the UK spends. A lot has changed since this show was last on. 2 years ago, the region was facing protests from Tunisia to Egypt, Libya to Bahrain. In fact, it was troops from here in the Gulf who were deployed to Bahrain at the request of the government to protect oil and gas facilities and financial institutions at the height of the protests in the capital, Manama. So how has this new look Middle East changed the way companies are doing business in this region?
During the last 2 to 3 years, we've seen an increasing urgency in terms of bringing solutions quickly to the region, total solutions. So we've put people in the UAE, in Saudi Arabia, in Libya, where things are moving very, very quickly. And we see a real difference now in that there's an urgency, there's a willingness to really invest in not only hardware, but training, ongoing logistics and support. So we find that we have to be here with boots on the ground, with our employees embedded day to day with our potential customers.
Now, with heightened concerns over security across the region and new political directions in Egypt, Libya and Tunisia, how has this changed spending across the region over this period of time? Joining me to discuss this is David Reith from IHS Janes. David, how are governments spending their defence budgets these days?
Sure. What we're seeing is, in the context of the overall defense environment, even more so than 2 years ago, it's a buyer's market out there. And so as even the United States starts to reduce their defense budget, or at least the growth of that defense budget, they're seeking external markets. And the Middle East is one of those areas where we're actually still seeing rapid growth in defense budgets.
Now, there are new political realities across this region. So how are defense companies changing their behavior?
I think right now there's a bit of a sensitivity surrounding those areas. Again, these companies want to be responsible actors in the global space, and so they need to be careful about not moving too far in front of the political processes in these countries, and yet they're still in an extremely competitive environment, and so they want to make sure that they go out and grasp every opportunity out there. So there's a tension between the urgency to go out and sell their wares and to make sure they're responsible actors.
Can you talk a bit about countries that have gone through uprisings versus countries that haven't?
So they're a diverse set of countries as well. And for example, Egypt has a very strong security relationship with the United States. And in fact, the United States supplies a lot of the money to purchase those weapons. And so that doesn't change immediately. The U.S. has maintained that relationship with Egypt and has tried to use it as a part of the stabilizing relationship between those two countries. Now that's quite different from Libya, for example, that up until relatively recent times was under sanctions for the United States, and so they wouldn't deal with them in a reasonable way. And then even immediately after the sanctions were lifted, American companies knew that it would be difficult to deal with the Libyan government, that they would certainly receive a lot of scrutiny on those export efforts.
David Reith speaking to me earlier. To Dubai now, a city that's grown to become the shopping capital of the Middle East. But while it tries to woo visitors with mall upon glitzy mall, a rather unwelcome side industry is gaining popularity too. Katie Watson has this report.
one of the places to do retail therapy. This is Dubai Mall, and it has more than 1,200 shops and claims to have the largest collection of designer fashion brands under one roof anywhere in the world. Last year, 65 million people walked through its doors to splash some cash. And in this part of the mall, which is dedicated to top-end brands, some serious cash is needed. But this isn't the only place in Dubai that people go to find some designer shopping.
You're unbelievable.
A bag selling for nearly $1,400 in the mall sells for less than $100 5 minutes down the road. When we tried to film openly in the market, we soon realised cameras weren't welcome.
Nice bags, ma'am. I'm going to give you 2 nice bags here.
Ordinarily, though, shopkeepers are very happy to show off their goods. On one of our trips, we were invited to visit a secret flat full of fake bags. These brands are hidden here because police raids on places like this have made shopkeepers nervous. They don't take any risks. We were locked in the flat while we were shown around. Dubai cemented its position as the Middle East's biggest trading hub. More than 13 million containers pass through its ports every year. This growing trade has also seen a rise in the number of counterfeits in everything from designer goods to medicines. For brand owners, it's not good news.
Counterfeit can damage the reputation of the brand, the reputation of the brand owner, the reputation of the country, the reputation of the economy. I mean, everybody, all the stakeholders are affected by the counterfeits, and it's a crime. We're talking about worldwide statistics. They are talking about $800 billion per year. So the problem is really huge. And this part, I mean, some studies, they are talking about 25 billion in the Arab countries.
But Dubai is cracking down on fakes. People are fined and goods are confiscated. But that's as much as they would tell me, so as traders don't get wise to their tactics.
We confiscate counterfeit goods from retailers, but the wholesalers are the main issue here. So the more difficult we make it on wholesalers, this issue will decrease drastically, and it already decreased. The number of raids decreased by 30%, but the quantity and the quality of the raids increased.
But for those representing big brands, they say more needs to be done on both sides.
First of all, more deterrent penalties. This is a no-brainer. The fee imposed against traders in counterfeit goods ranges between $4,000 to $8,000. That's still not deterrent. However, there is some blame on the trademark owners themselves as well. A lot of the brands that are in Dubai counterfeited and sold are not taken after by the brand owners, that they do not protect them or take legal action against these counterfeiters. So that's actually encouraging these traders to deal in that brand.
Dubai sells itself as a city where East meets West, offering something for everyone who comes here, not least with its shops. Dubai may have designs on being a fashion capital, but if it's going to keep the labels here, it has to crack down on its counterfeits.
Now, as we just saw in Katie's report there's no shortage of designer shops in this country. But when it comes to men's suits, 1 in 10 is made to measure rather than bought off the peg. Simon Atkinson finds out how cutting cloth is becoming cutting edge.
Dubai's old districts are very different from the malls the city's famous for. But it's the part of town where many of its tailors call home. For decades they've been making their mark here. And if you wanted to get a suit made, you'd come to this sort of shop in this part of town. But it's a modern, image-conscious city. And when it comes to suits, experts are seeing fashions change.
A few years ago it was quite acceptable and quite common for men to go to the backstreet tailors and use those to knock out quite a cheap suit for $100 very quickly. Whereas now, as menswear trends have shifted and men are getting a lot smarter, men want to focus on detail and luxury, and men in the Middle East have got a bit more money to spend, and they're willing to spend it on tailoring and suits and on their wardrobe. So for some men in the Middle East, the backstreet tailors just don't cut it anymore.
This is Shed, an author, entrepreneur and regular customer at this top-end tailor's. At home there's a wardrobe full of suits he's had made here. And there's nothing too unusual about that, except his home isn't in Dubai, but London.
Dubai affords me an amazing opportunity, which is to get a tailor-made suit that makes me look like $1 million and doesn't cost anywhere near $1 million. The quality of the tailors here is pivotal in my decision to plan my trips. I'm getting 5 suits made and 5 shirts made. So actually the two go hand in hand.
And it seems his story's not too uncommon. The shop has a growing list of customers, many of them who are just passing through town.
People come here for meetings and conferences, and sometimes they run short of a shirt. They come to our shop. We do it in 6 hours' time. After the meeting is over, they come back to get the suits made. And they're so happy that they plan their next holiday primarily to get their suits and the shirts made.
This overseas interest has helped make Dubai's suit industry worth about $50 million a year. And one local company hopes innovation and technology can create an even bigger market. It does away with part of the tailoring process, letting customers take their own measurements, 18 in total, and submit them online. The suits are made in Dubai and then posted anywhere in the world. And to try and reassure customers, if the item doesn't fit, they can send it back or get alterations done locally and have those costs refunded. A policy which puts a lot of pressure on the business.
What we've spent a lot of time doing is converting what was traditionally an art into a science. When we first started this, we needed to make pretty sure that our sort of accuracy rate was very high and our alteration rate was very, very low. The more refunds, the more sendbacks that people don't like their suits because we do guarantee our first, it just eats into our profits and our margins.
And to try and get more accuracy, they're pushing the technology a little further.
Even if you haven't got a tape measure handy, you've probably got one of these, a CD or DVD. And because across the world they're made to a standard size, if you hold it up in front of your computer's webcam, the company can calculate your measurements with enough precision, they say, to make a perfectly fitting suit.
28. Back in the shops of old Dubai, they're sticking to more traditional techniques. And they're confident their heritage and skills still measure up to the more high-tech competition.
Simon Atkinson reporting there. Right, we're going to take a short break now, and when we come back, get a grip why foreign ownership is still a sticking point here in the UAE. Welcome back to the programme. I'm Nima Abouarte. Setting up a company here in the UAE can be complicated. Businesses need to be majority owned by Emiratis unless they're set up in so-called free zones, areas like the ports and the International Financial Centre, where different rules and regulations apply. Now, this week, a new draft companies law was debated, but the clause to do with foreign majority ownership was removed and will be discussed at a later date, disappointing many. Well, to find out more, I spoke to Niall O'Toole from Clyde & Co.
There's been pressure in the system to allow foreign ownership for some time. And what you've seen in the Emirates, and particularly in Dubai, is release valves through free zones. So in the myriad of free zones in the Emirates, in Dubai, 100% foreign ownership is allowed. It's allowed in Ras Al Khaimah, in the free zones there, in Abu Dhabi, but it's not allowed onshore. And looking around the Gulf, seeing how the competition has changed, seeing Kuwait brought in a new companies law last year, in Qatar, they are increasingly allowing exemptions to allow majority foreign ownership, and in some cases 100% foreign ownership. Saudi Arabia in particular has liberalised its economy almost by stealth over the last 5 or 6 years, and they probably don't get the credit they deserve. So coming back to the Emirates, it's surprising. The Emirates has a tradition of innovation. I would expect the Emirates to stay ahead. So the delay in passing the companies law, it hasn't stopped inward investment, but it hasn't made it any easier.
Where is the resistance, though? Is it because, especially in the wake of the Arab Spring, they don't want to be seen to be taking away from their own people at the moment? Because can you explain briefly how it works? An Emirati ends up owning 51% of a business that somebody else sets up, effectively.
It's not always that way, but it has been that way. And yes, there are a myriad of examples that are structures that people use. But it's, that was the past. This was a time when, let's say, Emirati businesses weren't as capitalized, weren't as sophisticated as they are today. Many of them are world leading. They don't need artificial protection. And in fact, what the Emirates needs is it needs greater inward investment. We need more jobs for Emiratis. Now, at the moment, the vast majority of Emiratis in work are working for the public sector. So where are their jobs going to come from? It has to be the private sector. A strong and vibrant private sector is a boost to Emiratization. A strong and vibrant private sector is facilitated by inward investment.
But how does this really boost Emiratization, i.e. giving work or benefits to the local community, when it would appear that the haves will get more, people with influence will be the go-to people to be the co-owners of these businesses, they'll open doors and that sort of thing, and those who don't have as much will get very little?
I disagree there. I think more opportunity allows for more Emiratis to come into the workforce, to work their way up through businesses, to become successful businessmen on their own.
But they're not necessarily part of the business, though. These are co-signatories a lot of the time.
You don't have to be part of the business to work in one, to learn from one, and eventually to go out and start your own. You have to start somewhere. Jobs for Emiratis is boosted by having a strong and vibrant private sector.
So your clients, the foreign investors who want to come here and do business, do they lament the fact that the law, which has been talked about for many years now, still hasn't changed, still doesn't give them the majority ownership of their own businesses? Surely it's holding, investment back.
It's funny in that the existing laws haven't stopped inward investment, look around you, but they haven't made it any easier. And
But wouldn't it be more if the law was different?
I believe so. I believe so. And I believe if you look around the region, there is more competition. There's competition for inward investment. If you are a business in Europe or America and you're looking to invest, do you look at the Middle East? Do you look at China? We have to attract this inward investment.
Niall O'Toole from Clyde & Co speaking to me earlier. Now let's see what other business stories are making headlines across the region this week. Shares of India's jet airlines plunged this week after Abu Dhabi's Etihad said it would need to revise the terms of its deal to buy a stake in the carrier. Etihad chairman Sheikh Hamad bin Zayed Al Nahyan told Reuters it was too early to say when a final agreement between the two airlines would be struck. The deal will be the first since India relaxed ownership rules in September and allowed foreign carriers to buy up to 49% in local ones. Jordan is in talks with Israel to find a new source of gas for Jordanian power plants in an attempt to reduce production costs. Egypt used to provide around 90% of the gas Jordan used to produce electricity, but repeated pipeline attacks meant that only half that amount got through last year. This meant that Jordan had to switch to more costly alternatives for its subsidised power, putting even more pressure on the kingdom's already stretched finances. Qatar Holding is to launch an investment firm worth $12 billion. The firm will purchase global assets and be listed on Doha's stock exchange within weeks in a bid to attract local investors. Qatar Holding is part of Qatar Investment Authority, a sovereign wealth fund that in recent years has bought up stakes in high-profile assets like mining company Xstrata and London department store Harrods. Now, internet uptake across this region is rocketing, but the ability to buy goods online isn't keeping up. Credit cards aren't always accepted, and banks are still wary of online transactions. But this could be about to change, as Jonathan Frewin now reports.
Another busy day in the warehouse of one of the Gulf's fastest growing internet fashion retailers. They send hundreds of parcels to customers every day. But while in the Western world, internet shoppers almost always pay online using a credit card, that's not the case here. About 80% of these packages will be delivered to customers who'll pay cash on delivery, because they don't yet trust online retailers with their credit card details.
But that proportion of cash on delivery poses a big challenge to e-commerce companies. They say that up to around a third of shipments can come back to their warehouse for a number of different reasons, and that is a big dent on the bottom line.
Many customers who make these orders are not reachable by our logistics companies, or they decide that they don't want the package once they receive it. So for us, there's a huge cost of sending these products out to the customers and then having to take them back and already having paid for shipping.
If businesses like this are going to lower the impact of these problems, then something needs to change. And this company hopes the Gulf launch of PayPal, the online payments company, will make a difference.
When it comes to credit cards, There are a few issues related to fraud, which have forced us to block international credit cards, and this is where PayPal comes in. PayPal has already done the fraud checks for us. It brings in a much broader market of international customers and local customers who have access to PayPal accounts.
So far, though, PayPal only accounts for about 2% of Namshi's sales, not enough to make much difference. PayPal itself, though, is confident there's room for growth. It estimates online shopping is worth $9 billion in the Middle East and North Africa, and expects that to grow to $15 billion by 2015.
Today, most of it is people buying outside. The opportunity is making the people buying locally and giving them a chance to transact, to find the right product or service in the region rather than going to Europe or the US.
So the Pocket TV is one of the world's smallest microcomputers, and it runs Android on it. So you plug it into the back of any regular television and you create a smart television solution.
This UAE startup company exports its locally designed products to consumers all over the world. It says PayPal helped get round problems with existing payment methods, but it's not been simple.
We started initially looking at local banks, and the setup fees were tremendous, around $10,000 deposits plus several months of discussions, negotiations. So we ultimately ended up going with PayPal, and that has also had its challenges. PayPal as a solution doesn't allow you to transfer your money back into the UAE. You have to set up a US bank account and transfer your money to the US and then funnel it back into the UAE, which is a very convoluted process, requires IRS application forms and setting up corporations in the USA, etc. So it's been quite a challenging setup altogether. It's still easier than dealing with the UAE local payment gateways.
PayPal's told Ahmed it's working on getting local bank deposits up and running soon. Back at the online fashion retailer, they're adding the latest ranges to their online catalogue. And making it easier for customers to pay in advance for the latest trends is one more step towards improving the picture for online businesses in the Gulf.
Jonathan Fruin reporting there. Well, our time is very nearly up. I do hope you've enjoyed our programme. Before we go, let's see how the region's main markets performed this week. And remember, we'd love to hear from you. Our email address is middleeastbiz@bbc.co.uk. And you can go to Twitter and Facebook for latest photos and news from our teams across the world. Now, next week, we're looking at Dubai's renewed confidence. Mega projects are back and property prices are rising, but a lot of money still needs to be repaid as a result of the city's debt crisis a few years ago. So who owes what, and can the money be found to prevent another bubble bursting? Until then, from me, Nima Abu Warde, and the rest of the team, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.